So let's now have a look at these phrasal verbs, these multi-word verbs. And it's one of those things where multi-word verbs are, I won't lie to you, multi-word verbs are a nightmare. They are an absolute nightmare. We have, no nas angielskiej mowy bільш-менш 10 000 multi-word verbs. Ale у звичайній англійській мові ми вживаємо лише 500, я сказав би, 500-600. So it's still a lot, but it's not as many as like all of them put together. So what we're going to do, the question I had was about how do we know when to use up, on, at, in, down? How do we know when to use these words? And there are no exact rules, but there are some guidelines that I can give you to show you how we should use these words. So we're going to start first of all with the word up. So when we use up in a phrasal verb or a multi-word verb, this usually means to improve or to increase something. So for example, we can say we need to brighten up the room. So we need to increase the brightness, make it brighter. Or something like the car, should be a space there, the car sped up. So from the verb to speed, the speed increased. So up usually shows improvement or an increase in something. Then we can look at the opposite of this, which is the word down. Down is usually an opposite with multi-word verbs, with phrasal verbs, and this usually means to decrease something or to reduce something. So for example, we can say we need to slow down. So we want to decrease our speed and go slower. Or for example, the police narrowed down the number of suspects. So if you have 10 suspects and then you decide, okay, it's not him, not him, not him, not her, then we have 5 suspects, you have narrowed down the number. So you are reducing the number. So in phrasal verbs, up and down are usually opposites to each other in these types of constructions. Then another common preposition that we use is the preposition on, and this means to continue something usually. So for example, we can say like he went on writing even though I told him to stop. So he continued writing. Or we can also use something like, for example, we carried on even though we were tired. So again, here showing that we continue the action. It doesn't finish, it doesn't stop, it just continues on through time. And that's a very typical use of the preposition on in phrasal verbs. Then we have the preposition off, which is a very typical one. And we use off normally when we remove, we end, or we cancel something. All of these are very typical with the preposition off. So for example, we can say, when I left the room, I switched off the light. So here you are ending the light in the room. Or for example, we had to call off the match because of bad weather. So here to call off means to cancel something when it is in progress. So off usually has this meaning of removing, ending, or cancelling something. Then another common one we have is the preposition out. Now out is a little bit tricky, but we use out to show that something is in the open or it is not a secret anymore. So for example, we can say like, I found out that he had an accident. So he had an accident, it should be Past perfect. So I found out. Я дізнався. So now for you, it's not a secret anymore. You know that this happened. So out is usually when it's not a secret. We can also say, for example, I spoke out about equal rights, for example. So if you speak out, you say what you think. So now it's not a secret for other people. Now they know how you feel about this. So out pretty much always has this idea of being in the open. It's not a secret anymore for people. Okay, so there are four more that we need to look at. The next one is away. And we often use away very similar to using off about removing. Away is also very often about removal or disposal of something. So for example, you can say the lorry took away the rubbish, for example. It removed the rubbish, took it from the location. Okay, Cat Sunset, thank you for following. I appreciate you. We can also have, for example, the wind blew away the washing, for example. So blow away means the wind took it into a different place. The word wind we will actually look at a little bit later because there was a question about why we say kind, but we say wind. Why is there a difference in pronunciation? A little bit later in the stream I will explain about this topic. So away is about removal or disposal of something. Another common one that we use is the preposition back. Now, we use back to show returning to the past. This is the most typical use of the word back. So, for example, we can say, I want you to think back to your childhood. I want you to think about your childhood, to remember in the past what happened. Or, for example, the program will look back on the history of the Beatles, for example. Again, this idea returning to the past. And this is what back typically does. It returns us to the past and shows that we are thinking about something that already happened at some point in the past. Then we have two more. The next one is around. It's very typical. And we use around to show that we have no purpose, no goal, no aim, no reason for doing something. So you can say, for example, we hung around in the town centre waiting for our friends. So here, hung around, from the phrase hang around, meaning, again, just to do nothing, just to standing there, no purpose, no goal, just waiting, waiting, waiting. And so this is what around usually shows. Or, for example, another example, we messed around in the classroom before the teacher arrived. So again, messed around, you're acting stupidly in some way, but there is no real reason, no real goal, just because you feel like it. And so, yeah, around shows us this idea that you have no purpose, no reason to do something. And the final common preposition that we use with multi-word verbs is the word over. And we use over to show that we are thinking or talking about something. So, for example, the phrase, we mulled over whether to go for a walk. Mull over, this is very similar to the verb consider. So it's this idea of thinking about, thinking carefully what to do. Or, for example, we pored over the map, deciding where to go. Again, pore over means to look carefully at something. And again, it shows us this idea that you are thinking very carefully about the decision that you're going to make. So over is always this idea of thinking about, talking about, showing that we are considering deeply some kind of idea. So those are the typical prepositions and particles that we use with phrasal verbs. Now, these rules, they're not always 100% true. Like anything in English, There are always exceptions. It's our beautiful language. There are always problems and exceptions with rules. But in general, if you follow these, this should help guide you to choosing the right one. As I mentioned previously, phrasal verbs are really difficult. I do understand that they are challenging, but hopefully this will guide you and help you to the right points.